ho! Stephen Harper's got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! That Stephen Harper's got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! That Stephen Harper's got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! That Stephen Harper's got to go! Hey! Ho, ho! That Stephen Harper's got to go! Hey! Ho, ho! That Stephen Harper's got to go!
Stop! You say Harper, stop!
Harper! Harper!
I say stop! You say Harper, stop!
Harper!
Stop!
Harper!
I say stop! You say Harper, stop!
Harper!
Stop!
Harper!
I say stop! You say Harper, stop!
Harper!
Stop!
Harper!
When I say occupy, you say Canada, occupy!
Canada!
Occupy!
Canada!
I say occupy, you say Canada, occupy!
Canada!
Occupy!
Canada!
Absolutely, here we go. We have a guest speaker here, came all the way from Alberta, and we'd like to welcome him up. And we have Professor Anthony J. Hall. He's a professor of globalization studies at the University of Lethbridge, the author of An American Empire and The Fourth World, which introduces the series The Bull with One Spoon. An author of great books on globalization, and he knows what he's talking about. So please welcome Anthony J. Hall, please. Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Mic check.
Well, welcome to the spring of 2012. All around the world. Last autumn, we occupied. I was in London, England at St. Paul's. I was in Oakland, California. I was in Vancouver, BC at the occupied places. And I can tell you, the human species can't take it anymore. Our parliaments, our Congress, our legislatures have been occupied by lobbyists who have stolen our governments from the people. And last autumn, we took action. We realized that emergency measures are required because these governments have been stolen from the people. Now, this robocall scandal, that's what I'm going to address here today. We have to treat this issue as comprehensive. It's not a single issue, because every law this government passes, every appointment it makes, every military action it takes lacks legitimacy. Do we understand? This story can't be contained. And just like the media turned on Occupy, so we're seeing the power structure in Canada protect this illegitimate government, a government that talks about law and order and is right in front of us criminally having broken the election laws. And this is, we need an investigation, we need a royal commission. But what is already on the record is enough to say this is the most serious scandal in the history of Canada. This is beyond Johnny MacDonald with his little letter to the Canadian Pacific Railway and the deals they were making. This is beyond that. And there's a source. How many people know the name Annette Desgagne? Annette Desgagne. See, we're not getting the basic information. Annette Desgagne worked in the call center in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Those operators who are heroes, great Canadian heroes, they deserve the Order of Canada. They realized as they were reading out this script and phoning people across the country, and people were answering and saying, no, that's not our poll booth. Now, RMG has been working with what they call the Conservative Party of Canada since its inception in 2003. And the Conservative Party of Canada is really the Republican Party of the United States, representing those interests here in this Parliament. It's a takeover. It's regime change. These are not our legitimate governors. These are pretenders. These are criminals who violated the law of our elections. And Annette Degagné allowed her name to be used. She needs protection. She phoned the RCMP before the election, working for the Conservative Party of Canada. She phoned Elections Canada. Now the RCMP, is that a law enforcement agency?
No.
No. That's a political enforcement agency. In 2006, the RCMP entered the election campaign and sent a letter to the NDP saying the Liberal Party was under investigation, under criminal investigation, in the middle of an election. That is totally a political intervention on the part of the police. So the police are in Stephen Harper's pocket. And they don't have credibility and legitimacy. We have never faced a moment in Canada so menacing, where Canadian sovereignty has been so undermined and subverted as we do now. So my field is in history. I teach these things. I'm a professor of globalization studies in Lethbridge, Alberta, Canada. I grew up in Toronto. And my field is Canadian history, although now I write about global issues. And the fellow was holding up a book called Earth into Property, Colonization, Decolonization, and Capitalism. So I look at very big pictures, but since March the 11th, I've been working full-time on this electoral scandal. And I want to help you understand some of the historical background. Because what we're looking at here is something in Canada, we're dealing with something called regime change. Now you've heard regime change talked about for Iraq, for Afghanistan, for maybe Honduras or Guatemala, but we don't think of it happening here, but it has happened here. So let me take you back to 2003. 2003, there was an alliance party, something called the Alliance Party. Before that, it had been the Reform Party of Canada. And there was all this talk about unite the right, unite the right. Joe Clark was head of the Progressive Conservative Party for a time. David Orchard ran twice for the head of the Progressive Conservative Party. Do people here know who David Orchard is? Okay, it's a good thing I'm doing some lecturing here, because David Orchard came in second, and he gave his delegate support to a person called Peter MacKay. Peter MacKay is a lying scumbag having to 35s. But let me explain who he is, what is behind who this man Peter MacKay is. So he comes from an elite political family in Nova Scotia. He's running for head of the Progressive Conservative Party. Progressive, that word is very important. These dudes, these frauds in this house, they don't call themselves progressive anymore. Peter MacKay, to get the support to become head of the PC party, signed a contract with David Orchard saying he would not join the Alliance Party if the delegates supporting Orchard would support MacKay. I was one of them. So we have that in writing. MacKay, the lying, scandalous, fraud, he turns around and he does what he said he wouldn't do in the contract, and he joins the Harper Conservatives. And the Harper Conservatives eliminate the Progressive Conservative Party. Now that may not sound, if you don't know much history, you've heard of John Diefenbaker. You've heard of John Diefenbaker. He was Prime Minister of Canada. He got pushed out of office when he wouldn't support taking nuclear weapons into Canada. John F. Kennedy's acolyte, Lester Pearson, said, "I'll take nuclear weapons in Canada." They got together with their CIA dudes, the media. They made Diefenbaker look like a fool, and the liberals came in. And that's who the progressive conservatives are. It goes back deep in our history. We have a decent conservative tradition, but now it has been abolished. And the Harper conservatives took over on behalf of the Republican Party in the United States. Think about that. That is where our current Prime Minister gets his orders from. Washington and Tel Aviv. And I for one resent seeing my Prime Minister more loyal to the policies of Likudnik Israel than to Canada. That's where his first allegiance is, and that's a betrayal of our national sovereignty. So, this is important history. If I seem, is it okay to go on a bit?
Yeah!
I came a long way. And I want to share this. So in 2003, the progressive conservatives disappear. The indigenous conservative tradition is preempted by the conservative tradition coming out of the United States, the right-wing tradition coming out of the United States. I watched in 2004 after Bush got re-elected, and he made a beeline when he came to Ottawa here to go and see Stephen Harper. So Stephen Harper came to power holding, if anybody's got some water, I could get some water.
Yeah!
That's the life of it all.
So this is very serious, what I'm telling you. Stephen Harper comes to power representing the Bush franchise in Canada. It's very clear. Now in 2003, Jean Chrétien made one of the great moves in Canadian history. One of the very great moves in Canadian history. He said, no, we're not going to support United States, Great Britain, as they invade Iraq. And we didn't support the invasion of Iraq. Now I remind you that in 2003, Stephen Harper, who was then just coming in as leader of the opposition, he got up in Parliament and said that's a disgrace for Canada that we're not going into Iraq and supporting the maiming and destruction and genocide of innocent women, children, and elders in Iraq. And Stephen Harper, along with Stockwell Day, his born-again Christian compatriot, they wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal. So this is where the regime change starts. The Liberal Party of Canada says, no, we're not going into Iraq. We're not joining that military initiative. And we're defending Canadian sovereignty. And that was a great moment for Canada. Between 2003 and 2012, Stephen Harper starts a new party. That's quite something to do. That new party abolishes indigenous conservatism and puts in its place Republican Party right-wing approach to government. And I saw that in Alberta. Danielle Smith with the Wild Rose was working with Harper and those right-wing extremists. Thomas Flanagan, the professor at University of Calgary, groomed Harper and groomed Danielle Smith. And that was a big deal. That was a very important election that just took place. And the Progressive Conservative Party won. So there is still a Progressive Conservative Party. Although they were trying to destroy it, these Harper gang back in Alberta, their base. And you don't get to hear this kind of analysis too much in Alberta. And frankly, you don't get to hear this kind of analysis from university professors around the country, because there's a lot of paranoia to talk about 9/11, to talk about Fukushima, to talk about these election matters, these deep issues that are global issues, that are life and death issues. And we have very little articulation. I think you'll agree, informed articulation. So I knew I had to be here, just watching on Facebook. Did you see the speech I gave on the election matter at the Calgary City Hall? It was being discussed in Occupy occupy Canada. So that's why it came, that affirmation. So, 2003, start a new party. Within 10 years, less than 10 years, the Liberal Party, way off on the edges, the Conservative Party in majority government. Now, did that just happen through open debate, through fair elections, through the media telling the truth and all sides of the story? No, our media is bought and paid for. They are part of the plot of regime change. Regime change. Now, I told you, I showed you that regime change happened back in 1962, 63, when the Liberal Party preempted on behalf of nuclear weapons in Canada. How many nuclear weapons are in Canada right now? And who has control of those nuclear weapons? Why don't we see that talked about? I find that disgraceful that a government of Canada would support nuclear weapons in Canada. And that's the situation we have now. Never talked about. Never talked about.
Our dirty secret.
So, between 2003 and 2011, we have this regime change. And the 2006 election involved cheating on behalf of the Conservative Party. They overspent their limits. They didn't do correct accounting. And they were charged with criminal acts by Election Canada. And they pleaded guilty. So this Conservative Party of Canada has violated election laws. And guess what deal they made? Does anybody know about this? It's so weird in your country talking about things where it's just like you're talking about Tibet or something. Like, this is an important part of the scandal, that we aren't given the information we need. So in 2011, there's a plea bargain. Do you know what a plea bargain is? Mark Menard and the Conservative Party of Canada get together behind closed doors and they agree, yes, the Conservative Party broke the laws, yes, the Conservative Fund broke the laws, but these four individuals, actual people who were signing the checks, who were signing the accountant forms, one of them Senator Finley, one of them Senator Gerstein, four of them, they are not charged. They are let off. So Elections Canada made a deal behind closed doors and let the human beings who signed the papers breaking the laws, which the Conservative Party admits, off. Now, the Elections Canada isn't a transparent agency. They won't be reporting on all their investigations. They can take 5 or 6 or 10 years. Yeah, we want Elections Canada to do these investigations, but that is not enough. That is not sufficient. That's why we need a Royal Commission. So let's just go ahead now to 2011. May the 2nd, 2011. I predict May the 2nd, 2011 will be a day of infamy. As little by little this scandal comes out, and it is going to come out little by little. And I want you to remind your family, your employers, your cousins, that every time you hear this Conservative Party making a decision, voting on this, appointing that, it's all dubious. It's not legitimate, because this is a tainted mandate. And it's not just one story. It's a story of everything the Canadian government does. And if they don't give us this Royal Commission, they show their guilt. They show their guilt every day. We saw them in the House of Commons. Deny, deny, deny. Now you go, when you go home, you look up Annette Desgagnés, and you make sure you remember this Canadian heroine who is being covered up from us and who needs protection because she informed the RCMP. And the RCMP did nothing in Thunder Bay. Of course they wouldn't, because they're not a law enforcement agency. They're in Harper's pocket. The RCMP, and this is something to say in public, because police have a lot of power. And I'm saying it. And I want you to remember I'm saying it, and watch my back. Watch my back. This is serious, serious stuff. So we can't count on the RCMP. We can't count on the RCMP. Do you think the police state in Guatemala, Honduras, you think they depend on their top policemen, the dissident voices? No, those are banana republics, and this is a banana republic. And I actually have more respect for the resistance of people in Honduras and Guatemala and South Salvador. We've yet to see that kind of resistance here. We've yet to see it, but we're going to see it. It's May the 5th, and the water is getting warm, and the sun is coming up, and we are going to be occupying. Mic check!
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 Harper's a fraud!
Harper's a fraud!
This government
This government
is illegitimate!
is illegitimate!
Is illegitimate!
Is illegitimate!
So, the election of May the 2nd, remember that date, 2011, where we have enough information on the public record, especially from Annette Dagonier, who has already gone on record in court, because the Council of Canadians, who here knows who the Council of Canadians are? It is a great moment for the Council of Canadians that they are taking this issue to court. And fine, but we can't expect, our judiciary is not politicized. We can't, in a banana republic type state, take our media or our police to really be on the people's side or really respect the rule of law. But we'll give it a try. But we need a royal commission, that's for sure. So, let's be clear. I could talk about Front Porch Strategies, which is a company based in the United States that worked for 14 Conservative Party candidates, including Fatino in Toronto, the CF-35 man, including Del Maestro, the secretary for Harper, who looks like such a lying scumbag trying to answer those questions in the House of Commons. So there is RAC 9 in Edmonton. There is Pierre Poutine. There is Guelph. There are many fronts. There is the Sandwich Islands, where Elizabeth May already in the last election talks about the fraud that took place back there. So there are many fronts to this, but I'm telling you, I'm 61 years old, I'm a researcher. The place to look in this scandal is Responsive Marketing Group, RMG. In 2003, the new Conservative Party, in other words, the Republican Party's Canadian branch plant, with the U.S. professor Tom Flanagan doing the negotiations, brings in Responsive Management Group, along with Craig Copeland and XNTEL DM, which is owning RMG. XNTEL DM has a terrible record of setting up phony charities and raising money. Now there's a whole weird legal twilight zone around this because political parties are charitable. They are non-profit organizations. People get a tax write-off, just like if you're giving to the Cancer Society or something like that. So there's a whole scam, a complex history of scams which go right through and all permeate this Responsive Management Group owned by XNTEL DM, which is now called Marketing Solutions Group in Calgary. And it has a really sleazy, deeply corrupt history. So Responsive Marketing Group plans with the Conservative Party something called the Constituent Information Management System, CIMS. So when you see CIMS, everybody acknowledges that is the best technology for raising money, for figuring out who to hit up for money, who is not conservative. And so we don't know what is in the Conservative Party's database. Do they get police records? Do they get hospital records? Do they get Facebook records? We know that these information mining companies just suck up the information without any respect for our privacy, for the rule of law. They'll do it for political advantage. So we know Elections Canada released when they were looking for non-conservatives to send to non-existing polling stations. They targeted, for some reason, people born between 1947 and 1949. That's what you call micro-niche targeting. Now, for some reason, they must have some information. Maybe those are the Woodstock generation. Maybe those are people who like marijuana. Maybe for whatever reason, they don't like the conservatives. So that narrow targeting of a specific group to send to phony polling stations, that is a developed science. Now, when I say this electoral cheating has a close relationship to the Republican Party, I draw your attention to the fact that George Bush did not win the 2000 election, the 2000 presidential election. Everybody knows that, right? The work has been done. It's scholarly. It's beyond any consideration that Al Gore actually got more votes. But they have a machine. They have a lean, mean cheating machine. And in 2004, the same thing, only probably worse. Kerry probably got even more votes than Al Gore, and certainly more votes than George W. Bush. So this whole history, this whole culture of taking power through regime change, I mean, it's in the United States. The Bushes, you know, our well-known CIA family. Now, I don't have to go into, you know, Prescott Bush and the Nazis and raising money for the Nazis and how the Nazis came into the CIA after the Second World War. But when the Bushes were running for office in the early part of the 20th century, they definitely brought in all their regime change, CIA, vote rigging tactics. And that's what we got in Canada now, just washing over us. So, the 2011 elections, we have so much evidence on the record. To my way of thinking, Annette Desgagnés is enough for the Governor General. The Governor General's office has been polluted and corrupted. The whole parliamentary system has been polluted by this Republican Party clone in Canada. Now, when I say prorogue, who knows what prorogue is?
Suspension of Parliament. Before moving on to the next legislative assembly.
Yes, and it has something to do with voting, right? Yes. I'm going to go for maybe 5 more minutes.
Okay, brother. Keep going.
But I thank you for this attentive moment. I'll remember this all my life. We're not just anywhere. And every one of us, we're taking responsibility. Whether we're being photographed or not, we don't care, because we're not taking it anymore. We're tired and fed up. We showed it worldwide in Occupy. And if you thought you saw something last autumn, wait for this coming year. Nados in Spain, in Greece, in Wisconsin. This is a global movement. And these little corrupt crime cabals, treasonous fraudsters, we're on to you. And we got the evidence. And Professor Hall and others are working on this day and night. And you can expect to see a lot coming out from this person on the internet, because there's no going back once you get to the point of articulating to this extent. And I thank you for being here and coming here. So that 2011 election We can't let that go. And we've got to put it in context. And we got to, at every moment, treat this government for what it is, an illegitimate, posing bunch of frauds who cheated their way. And police, because the police are politicized and in the pocket of the Prime Minister. You probably know it. You're decent men. I'm sure you know what happened in 2006 and how embarrassing that was for the country to see the RCMP enter politics to try to demean the Liberal Party and put the Conservative Party in office. And within the police, there are decent men and women. There are many of you who have dedicated your life to trying to do good law-abiding acts. We're counting on you, and we want you to look to us, because we'll have your back. We'll have your back if you show some respect for the rule of law, my law enforcement friends. Hey, hey! Ho, ho!
Stephen Harper's got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho! Stephen Harper's got to go! Hey, hey! Ho, ho!
Stephen Harper's got to go!
Hey, hey!
Stephen Harper is a puppet of Washington and Tel Aviv. Thank you.
Is Stephen Harper's government legitimate?
No!
Should we have accountability for a stolen election?
Yeah!
Do we need a new election now?
Yes!
Excuse me, officers. Hi. I would like to report a crime. Last year on May 2nd, I don't believe that we're past the statute of limitations, but last year on May 2nd, our democratic right to vote was suppressed, and we would like to make a report so that you may investigate it, free of political interference. And we will have your back for that because, you know, we support democratic systems, as I'm sure you do too. And I know you're in uniform, but I bet you when your uniform is off, you probably believe in what we believe in. When your uniform is on, we know you can't get in trouble, but just in case you care, we do have a petition you can sign, which is at least the very least you could do perhaps, a petition calling for a public inquiry, just so we can at least maintain the legitimacy of our democracy. And if you could get on that criminal investigation like right away, that'd be great. Our professor friend was correct in that when an election is taken or stolen, that delegitimizes it in a democratic society. Since we like to consider ourselves as living in a democratic society, when an election is taken, again, that delegitimizes it. However, what makes it worse is that when an illegitimate government continues to pass bills, that makes the bills illegitimate. And especially in a democratic society, when you try to pass bills that are not just voter suppressive, but suppressive of our freedom, like Bill C-30, the warrantless spy bill, which, by the way, I do not agree with. It is like a Gestapo law to spy on people without warrants, but that is doubly illegitimate. And therefore, we need to make sure that we have a legitimate government in power by protecting our democracy, by holding those who break the law to account. And we must call on you, please, to hold those people, the political parties, and the political operatives who broke the law. Please hold them to account. Please hold them to account. Arrest them. Arrest them. Stephen Harper needs to go to jail. We're gonna make sure you go to jail. Even if we will not rest, we will keep on fighting. We will make sure that our democracy is protected. We will not let ourselves slide into the trap that is fascism. Anyway.
Thank you. Let's talk about the Crime Minister. He's not the Prime Minister, he's the Crime Minister. That's what he is. Yeah. And I'll tell you why he's called the Crime Minister, because he surrounds himself with convicts, fraudsters. We got one advisor named is Bruce Carson. He was convicted of fraud 5 times. Had a psychological assessment, he failed, and the Prime Minister still hired him on. And another advisor was Tom Flanagan. Now, he was on the CBC. He called for the assassination of Julian Assange. Capital murder. That's capital murder, calling for a drone strike on Julian Assange. So this is the gentleman that this Prime Minister hangs around with. And Bruce Carson was caught swindling water contracts out of native reserves. That's what he was doing. He was hanging around with a prostitute, and he brought the prostitute to 24 Sussex. They had a big dinner party. That's what they did. So, you know, when they're passing through these omnibus bills with no debate, that's fraud. That's not the democratic process, and it cannot be tolerated in a democracy. And that's why we're here today, because we're standing up for our freedoms, for our liberties, and we must guard against them being attacked at all times. And I just want to put a shout out to everybody that came and dedicated their time from across the country. People came on airplanes to come here today. Give yourselves a round of applause. That is commitment. That is commitment. And even though we're a small group, it's the size of our hearts that matter. And that's what counts, is that in the future, we're doing it for the children. We're making sure that their generation is going to be free of this corruption, and that's why we need accountability within our governments. And very important, we can't stand for Bill C-30, spying on Canadians. You know, they passed that on February the 14th. The first naming of that bill was Bill C-51. That bill was named Investigative Powers into the 21st Century Act. Because of the online activism that specific day, they changed the name of the bill of Protecting the Child Predators Act. And they were caught changing the bill, going to the printer at the last hour. They tried to swindle Canadians, to trick us, to take away our fundamental privacy rights, so we're not spied on by the security state. We don't need an online surveillance state, do we?
No!
Do we need to be spied on?
No!
Do we need accountability?